For decades now, Pokemon has been content with delivering experiences which meet, though never entirely exceed our expectations. It's a franchise which prefers to evolve at its own pace as opposed to that of gaming as a whole. While this formulaic approach to game design has provided some of the most simplistic fun I've ever had in gaming, this latest entry, for me at least, left something to be desired. It marked a breaking point where I realized that these games are not necessarily afraid of change, but rather incapable of executing it in an enjoyable way. Now don't get me wrong, this does not mean that I hate these games. I enjoyed them for what they were. However, in my bitter old age, I can't help myself from taking to the internet to complain about them for clout. I'm kidding, of course, but in all seriousness, these games are solid, but I can't help but feel disappointed by them. To preface this video, I think it's important to look at the direction Pokemon has always taken. In recent years especially, every change made can be linked back to one concept: believability. However, gradually, each generation has attempted to bring the game closer to a living, breathing world akin to what we would see on the anime. This list of changes includes, but is not limited to, Pokemon following you around, more connected and bigger worlds, a day and night system, a greater focus on flora, social commentary and a focus on morality, travel between dimensions, Pokemon contests, weather, seasons, references to a larger world, ever grander cities, more ways to interact with Pokemon than battling, and of course, ever-improving graphics. Looking at Generation 8 from a distance, the case could be made that it is one of the largest leaps in Pokemon history. After all, being the first truly new experience on a home console, and having more expansive environments than any other generation alone should qualify it for this. Unfortunately, the execution of these ideas is all wrong. I think it might be a good idea to look at some of the features which I do like, because honestly, there are a lot more than you may expect from my opening statements. If I had to choose one word to describe the attitude which Game Freak took with this game, it would be big. The wilderness is big, the Pokemon are big, the cities are big, the gyms are big, the screen is big, the characters are big, and the plot is big. There is something almost poetic about this endeavor. It's such a simple yet cohesive theme which the game executes to varying degrees of success. The Pokemon League is probably the most successful example of this, with what I could easily call the perfect rendition of the gym challenge thus far. Working and battling your way through environments which ooze personality reminiscent of the trials from Sun and Moon is a great start. Couple that with the stadium of people cheering as you battle your way through the larger-than-life gym leaders to the greatest gym battle theme of all time, and you have an experience of pure childlike wonder. What makes this so effective is that not only does it look good, but the gym challenge is just that. Challenging. The perceived magnitude of the event is perfectly married to the actual difficulty of these battles. And of course, there is that point in every gym battle where the leader has one Pokemon left, the crowd bursts into song, and the two of you duke it out in the art of Dynamax. As ridiculous as Dynamax initially seemed to me, once I sat down and played with it, I couldn't help but grin with stupid excitement. It truly is a spectacle to behold, but more than that, it's just plain fun. The game doesn't force it either. In fact, using regular Pokemon against these foes can be even more enjoyable in some instances. The sense of personality felt within these gyms extends to the towns and many of the routes which surround them. These make Galar geographically diverse and therefore a delight to explore. Not only are they surprising for a Pokemon game, but the scale on display is awe-inspiring. Of course, the music for these areas ranges from solid to beautiful. My main gripe would honestly be the standard battle theme, which just doesn't hold up in the same way as those of many other series entries. Concerning the Pokemon themselves, I have to say that I didn't necessarily enjoy their designs at first. However, I've kind of come to accept that the charm of a new Pokemon design often lies in its bizarreness. One of the most divisive decisions made here involves the distribution of XP. Gone are the days of grinding your team one at a time. This has been replaced with what is essentially an XP share on steroids, giving all party Pokemon a sizable chunk of experience after each battle. While at first I was concerned that this would negate the challenge present in the game, it appears that from route to route, levels of wild Pokemon scale appropriately to pose a moderate threat. This is the Pokemon game for the modern era, and fortunately, Game Freak has realized this, giving us numerous ways to earn XP. My favourite of these would be Pokejobs, which are essentially a way to level up PC Pokemon. You can send them on these jobs and they will return with a respectable amount of experience. This was a much needed change, which allows you to level up Pokemon without having to devote such an unreasonable amount of time to brain-dead grinding. Couple this with the ability to alter your team at any point on the road and you have a game which encourages deviation from sticking to your first 6 Pokemon. As far as the wild area, it could be best described as ambition without actualization. Yes, it looks beautiful from afar. Yes, the Pokemon wandering around in the open are glorious. Yes, having to return several times to capture every Pokemon is clever, but it ends up feeling empty. Sure, you have Pokemon, merchants, digging, max raid battles, bike challenges, camping and such, but at the end of the day there's just something missing in the way of polish which breaks the believability of this space. And honestly, this is an issue which seeps into many other aspects of the game. As I said earlier, this game is tied together by a theme of scale. This scale, however, in many cases is merely a facade for elements of the game which were not sufficiently fleshed out. Whether it's the wild area with its unattractive texturing, the wooden attack animations, and I use that term loosely, in battles, the reused assets from the 3DS, the lack of a national dex, or the incredibly flimsy narrative. The experience suffers whenever its believability is compromised. I've heard some people say that they enjoy the plot of this game, however I can't get behind it. It just feels so inconsequential. I feel as though this may be partly down to Team Yell, who are hands down the worst team in Pokemon history. They're not the least bit menacing, and they're far too goofy to pose any threat. While I appreciate the irony of them being a stand-in for sulky fanboys, I just don't think that they service the story all that well. I will say that having the climax of the story play out simultaneously with the Pokemon League is a stroke of genius and a clever subversion of Pokemon tropes, but it still feels too little too late. Beedee and Chairman Rose are two of the most interesting characters within the game. However, they still fall into the all too familiar jerk rival redemption and power-hungry tycoon archetypes respectively, which are almost constant in Pokemon. And as far as Hop, I appreciate what they were trying to do, but I just don't feel motivated by a rival this self-doubting. I mean, this guy is supposed to make you want to kick his ass. I don't want to be guilt-tripped by his disappointment every time that I win. And I feel as though that kind of sums up the bittersweet attitude I have towards Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. For as much as they set out to do, these games' shortcomings make them all the more disappointing. Strangely, the game even feels better in handheld mode, because it's here that these shortcomings seem to be excused by the fact that this is, after all, a Pokemon game. But it didn't have to be this way. I don't want to feel as though I'm playing an upscaled 3DS game in 2019. The main issue with this game was, in my opinion, the fact that it was rushed for a 2019 Christmas release. For better or for worse, Pokemon games have become an annual tradition, and this will inevitably lead to them being somewhat subpar. However, the sad part is that Game Freak had the resources to make something truly special here, but instead, they barely tried to shift the status quo, and still fell short. So now we are left with something which feels like a rough draft of what could have been. I don't doubt that Game Freak can create a truly compelling Pokemon experience if they take their time, but that's something which I just can't see them doing. And for all the bad-mouthing I've done here, you may think that I hate these games, but I honestly still love them. After all, they're Pokemon. They delivered something great, yes, but it left me wanting more. I hope that Game Freak can deliver this to me someday, but until then, I must swallow in equal parts disappointment and contentment. Thank you for watching this video essay. It's something a little different to what I would usually do, but I enjoyed making it. Please be sure to subscribe and comment suggestions on how to improve my content going forward. I'm looking at turning this into something more frequent and in-depth, so any support is greatly appreciated.